tonight. An MP calls for an emergency debate in the House of Commons following 6 police-involved Indigenous deaths in just 11 days.
They're now attacking our youth and saying, you can't be on this beach, your beach is over there, stuff like that.
Echoes of the Dudley George incident and what one chief says is needed today.
These games that we're using, there's a lot of laughter around them. There's competition.
And how a new book in Swampy Cree is bringing new language lessons to the classroom. Tansei, good evening. I'm Cree Nation. Welcome to APTN National News. Today, Nunavut MP Lori Idlout called for an emergency debate in the House of Commons regarding the 6 Indigenous people who died while in contact with law enforcement in Canada in just 11 days. In a statement to the Speaker of the House of Commons, she said the lack of media coverage of these tragedies show that systemic violence and deaths of Indigenous peoples in Canada is normal and expected. After years of hearing about police reforms in the wake of Black Lives Matter, the government's commitment to pass a First Nations Policing Act, Indigenous peoples are owed answers by this government. People across Canada must know their parliament is addressing the institutional violence in their communities as a critical and immediate priority. MP Idlout brought forward these concerns during today's question period in Ottawa. An NDP spokesperson told APTN News that the Speaker of the House of Commons has ruled in favor and the emergency debate will happen this evening. We will bring you an update on this tomorrow. An organization that represents 33 First Nations in southern Manitoba is speaking up as the city of Winnipeg searches for a new police chief. Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels says over its 150 years of history, adding racism and brutal treatment of First Nation citizens have been at the cultural core of the Winnipeg Police Service. Daniels wrote to the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board calling for transparency in the selection process. The Grand Chief also says there should be representation from Southern First Nations on the decision-making panel and says a First Nation chief or police with lived experience should be selected. Danny Smith retired as Winnipeg Police Chief earlier this month. He had been Chief of Police since 2016. A press release from SCO notes it was Smith who made the decision not to search a Winnipeg area landfill for Morgan Harris or Mercedes Myron. In 2021, SCO conducted a survey on racism in policing. Nearly 90% of respondents felt racism in policing was a problem in Manitoba. 70% of respondents had experienced racism in policing firsthand. Applications for the Chief of Police job closed last week. The board is hoping to have someone in the role by November. Daniels says the chief must have an understanding of the historic and current damage the WPS has done to First Nation citizens and a willingness to address urgently needed cultural change within the police force. Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit is investigating the death of a 52-year-old man who died while in Winnipeg police custody over the weekend. On Sunday, just before 4 a.m., Winnipeg police arrested a man in the 100 block of King Edward Street East for an outstanding warrant. He was then brought to police headquarters and handed over to the Central Processing Unit. Police say the man was medically cleared by a paramedic and put in a holding room. Then at 7:30 a.m., while police conducted a routine check, the man was found unresponsive in the holding room. Paramedics provided emergency medical care before taking him to St. Boniface Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The investigation into what happened continues this week. MPs returned to Ottawa Monday for the first day of the fall sitting of Parliament. This included a lively question period where NDP MP Leah Gazan accused the government of failing to live up to its Jordan's Principle obligations. Indigenous Services Minister Patty Haidu responded by blaming, in part, the previous Conservative government.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speakers, the Liberals' failure to fund services through Jordan's principle is endangering First Nations youth. In fact, in Winnipeg, Spirit Horse Action Therapy is owed almost $400,000. And the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society says this government's neglect is putting kids at risk. When will the Liberals respect their legal obligations to Jordan's principle and ensure the health and safety of First Nations youth?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so proud to be part of a government that puts Indigenous children first. First Nations children are getting the services they need after a decade of neglect with the previous Conservative government ignoring their needs, leading to historic lawsuits and, of course, the compensation required to make up for such a terrible omission. And we are making it right, Mr. Speaker. We're ensuring that no First Nations child goes without the care they deserve.
First Nations leaders were before the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee in Ottawa on Monday. Some were there to voice their concerns about Bill C61, the First Nations Clean Water Act. Bill C61 is currently going through a second reading in the House of Commons. Many First Nations have welcomed the legislation which will address long-standing drinking water and wastewater problems in their communities if passed. However, the legislation has been criticized for a lack of funding, failing to protect clean water sources, and putting any liability on First Nations. Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations Vice Chief David Pratt testified that the government is exceeding its authority with this legislation.
61 says Canada affirms First Nations' right to self-government and jurisdiction, then imposes layers of federal law that narrows our jurisdiction until there is very little room to move. None of this has anything to do with drinking water and should be taken out. Fresh water will become highly valuable in the near future, and we see the legislative overreach in C61 as part of a larger strategy by Canada to strengthen their decision-making over water.
Manitoba's NDP government has removed MLA and backbencher Mark Wasilou from the party's caucus. It comes after the NDP learned Wasilou's business partner is working as Peter Nygaard's criminal defense lawyer. Nygaard was sentenced to 11 years in prison earlier this month for sexual assault. In a statement, the NDP caucus chair said Wasilou failed to demonstrate good judgment and should no longer continue in his role. 29 years ago, unarmed land defender Dudley George was shot and killed by Ontario Provincial Police. That incident eventually led to the Ipperwash Inquiry. In 2007, the final report of the Ipperwash Inquiry was released. The chief of Kettle and Stony Point First Nation tells APTN reporter Annette Francis recommendations from that report would help in an ongoing issue.
Ipperwash Beach sits on the shores of Lake Huron. It's one of the longest freshwater beaches in southwestern Ontario. As calm as it looks, there's been ongoing tension here between cottagers and the Kettle and Stony Point First Nation. Chief Kimberly Brissett said things got heated this summer when cottage owners barricaded the entrance to the beach.
That's kind of what sparked the community to say we need to do something about this because they're now attacking our youth and saying you can't be on this beach, your beach is over there, you know, stuff like that. So that really brought an uprising in the community.
The beach barricades were eventually removed by community members last month, but Brissett says cottagers had no right to waterfront. They have never surrendered.
Some of the realtors have added on the deeds that they own to the water's edge or they own 25 feet, which that's never been surrendered by our people, and especially the beach that's right in our community, it's never been surrendered.
Brissett says had the recommendations of the Ipperwash Inquiry been acted upon, these types of disputes should not have happened. According to the Anishinabek Nation, which represents 39 First Nations in Ontario, there has been little movement on the inquiry's 100 recommendations. 7 key recommendations were supposed to be immediately implemented, including the establishment of a permanent, independent, and impartial agency to facilitate facilitate and oversee the settling of land and treaty claims in Ontario. The agency should be called the Treaty Commission of Ontario. Brissett says there is documentation from the inquiry stating they are the original title holders to the beaches and that legal action will be taken to prevent the cottagers from blocking the beach again. APTN contacted the president of the West Ipperwash Property Owners Association and did not get a response by airtime. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ipperwash Beach in Ontario.
The Ermineskin Cree Nation south of Edmonton has relaunched its lawsuit against the federal government over the right to safe and clean drinking water. The lawsuit was originally launched 10 years ago. Ermineskin says the federal government's proposed Bill C61 on First Nations drinking water fails to recognize that people on reserve have the same right to trust what comes out of their tap like every other Canadian. According to the Canadian press, people in the community will spend up to $200 a month on bottled water because the water from their taps is brown and discolored. APTN News will bring you more updates on this story in the near future. A Cree mother from Alberta hopes to inspire others to live a sober lifestyle. That story after the break. Plus, it has been 1 week since Stephen Iggy Deedham was fatally shot by RCMP during a wellness check. Family and community members recently staged a walk to call for justice and demand change. Angel Moore is working on this story. Here's a preview.
About 100 people walked in the ELCB First Nation, calling for justice for Stephen Iggy Deedham. The 34-year-old father and fisherman was shot 1 week ago by an RCMP officer during a wellness check. The community is outraged, stopping at the RCMP detachment for ceremony. Tegan Copage is a band counselor. He said he and other community members rode on the building to send a message and prove a point.
We just got to continue to fight and get justice for our brothers and sisters. And
community members are calling for the RCMP to leave ELCB. I will have more of this story later on APTN National News.
Welcome back. An appeal made on behalf of the Kakaya Nation regarding BMC Minerals' Kakaya Mine was heard in the Yukon's Court of Appeal late last week. It's the latest in a years-long legal saga between the Kakaya and the territorial and federal governments concerning the proposed mining project. Sarah Connors gives us the details.
Dozens gathered outside Whitehorse's main courthouse on Thursday to lend their support to the Kakaya Nation's appeal of a territorial Supreme Court decision.
I didn't know that the Kakaya had so much support. I really, I just can't believe it.
For years, the nation has been fighting the territorial and federal governments on BMC Minerals' proposed Kakaya Mine.
The big mining companies come into our small community in our village. They talk to us. We got concerns, we say, but they don't hear us.
The open pit copper, zinc, and lead project is located near the Kakaya communities of Ross River and Watson Lake. The Kakaya have many concerns about the project and how it will affect their land, especially when it comes to caribou.
Caribou that sustain us. That's why I'm here today.
The mine's decision bodies, the territorial and federal governments, gave the mine the green light to proceed to the next stage in the approval process in June 2022. The Kakaya said the governments failed to properly consult with them before making a decision and filed a judicial review the following month. Yukon Supreme Court Chief Justice Suzanne Duncan said in a decision released earlier this year that the governments mostly upheld their duty to consult. But the Kakaya appealed, arguing the judge erred in her decision.
One of the things that we'd like to do is to protect our future generations. What we do here today, it will impact tomorrow.
But the Attorney General of Canada, Yukon Government, and BMC Minerals, who are listed as respondents in the appeal, said the Crown did uphold its duty and that the presiding judge was reasonable in her decision. The two-day hearing wrapped up on Friday. The appeal court reserved its decision. It will likely be several months until it's released. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thank you, Sarah. A Cree mother from the Montana First Nation in Alberta has become a fashion model after beating addiction. And soon she'll be off to the fashion capital of the world in Paris, France, to showcase Indigenous designed fashion. APTN's Chris Stewart has her story.
Since the end of 2022, Janine Pegan has worked at the Musqueam's Counseling and Support Services. A month before she started working there, she had graduated from their detox and rehab program. The mother of two had fallen into addiction and says that it was with the help of the entire staff that she was able to recover.
The staff actually had a hand in my sobriety. So everybody that is here as a team has helped out with my sobriety with counseling, mending broken hearts, the programs, the graduation. There's just so many hands that helped me on my sober journey.
While also being an admin assistant, she is a model and an in-demand beader.
And I've gained a large Instagram following because of my beadwork. And then I started beading for local and native celebrities. So it's been quite the journey. It's taken me pretty far.
And now her modeling career is reaching heights she did not expect, getting to model in the biggest runways in the world.
I went to New York last week, my first time leaving Alberta, and it was a really amazing experience. I loved every moment of it. I modeled for Chelsea's Creations, and I modeled for Indigenously beaded hat designs. And they've taken me almost all over the world, and we're headed to Paris in 2 weeks.
But with her success, there have been some downsides. She has had some people not celebrate her happiness.
I do face bullying. I get picked on, and I get messages, you don't belong in Paris, you don't belong in New York, and it's local. And it doesn't really bother me. It bothers me to know that other women and other, youth can go through that. But for me, I overcame an addiction. So like name calling and bad behavior isn't really a bothersome.
Janine is proof that addictions can be overcome and some of the biggest moments of your life can still be ahead of you. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Maskwacis, Alberta.
Thank you, Chris. There is a new resource for those who want to learn the Swampy Cree language. We'll tell you more when we come back in less than 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo comes from Heather Smith, who captured this shot of a golden sunset in Frog Lake, Alberta. Hi, thank you, Heather, for sending that in. If you have a picture you want to be featured here, email it to share@aptn.ca to be featured on APTN National News. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
Over on the east, Halifax 27, Fredericton 29, Cartwright 19, the Grand River 22, Gaspé 28, Quebec City 27, Ottawa 29, Sault Ste. Marie 29 as well, 29 in Timmins, Big Trout Lake 25, Churchill 22, 23 in Thompson, 26 in Winnipeg, Dauphin 25, Regina, Rain in 26, Saskatoon 21, Larange 22, Stony Rapids 19, Sunny in 23 in Fort McMurray, Fort Chippewa 19, 24 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 20, Penticton 22, Campbell River 16, 18 in Prince George, Dease Lake 13, Watson Lake 12, Dawson 12, 17 in Yellowknife, Wrigley 15, Colville Lake 9, Sax Harbor 9 as well, 9 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield 10, and Iqaluit 5 and Clyde River 4.
A woman from the Fox Lake Cree Nation in northern Manitoba just launched a resource book for swampy Cree immersion learning in the classroom. She got the idea and the help from a well-known Anishinabek Nation speaker that also teaches at the University of Manitoba. With more, here's TR Wheatley.
Awas Ginasel, Swampy Cree for goldfish, the game these language trainees are engaged in. That's just one interactive example as to how to teach in Inumiwin in the classroom.
These games that we're using, there's a lot of laughter around them. There's competition.
Pat Nigwans is a well-known Anishinabek speaker who's published 17 Ojibwe language books through her company, Majanati Inc. She just finished helping Sharissa Noth with this Swampy Cree immersion handbook called Pigisquetan, meaning let's talk.
I wanted Pat's book to be translated into Inumiwin because we don't really have that. And when I started off as a learner, there was really no resources for me to learn off of. I had Pocket Cree, and then I had online dictionaries in Y dialect, but nothing really went over those complex grammar patterns and verb conjugations and stuff that happens in the language. So I learned a lot from my Anishinaabe learning friends.
Noel says the book came to reality by accident after making a joke to Nigwans at a language conference.
Had survival phrases and games, and the language in it was great. The dialogues, I just thought it was fantastic, and I was like, I need this in anyone. So I was bugging her at the conference. I was like, Pat, I need it in anyone. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I got an email a few weeks later from her saying, okay, do it then.
More than a year later, this resource guide has come to life. Noel calls herself a second-hand learner because she grew up writing and reading the language in school, but didn't speak it. She did as much of the translation that she could on her own, then got her grandma and mom involved.
It was a lot of dialogues and the teachings and those encouragement phrases that, second language learners, we don't hear a lot naturally.
Nigwan says that is what it's all about, to keep the language going, involving families and communities.
And I hope it happens again. I would like to see Dakota Immersion Handbook. That's the next thing I would like to see. They're losing their language too.
This Cree immersion book includes 2 months of lesson plans and activities for interactive learning. Like this game of baseball that even I'd take a swing at. Nearly miss. And recover to take first base. But more importantly, learn in Inumiwin. TR Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, TR. And that's your Monday APTN National Newscast for this September 16th. We'll be back again tomorrow for your midday newscast. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at our HQ in Winnipeg and from our reporting staff across the country, Masicho, hi, miigwech. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.